Hi guys, I'm Marco Nerd74. Today's video is about the OXY5 from Lynx Heli Innovations. This heli I got as a used helicopter. It's very important to get familiar with the mechanics and the whole helicopter before I go for the first flights. For this reason, this video today will be about the whole disassembling of the helicopter. So I have to check all the mechanics, all the parts, all the electronics, if everything is still fine, so that the first flights will be safe and I won't have any issues, because this size of helicopter is pretty dangerous in the air if something goes wrong. For everyone out there, if you buy a used helicopter, first disassemble the helicopter, check everything, rebuild it, and then go fly and enjoy your new helicopter. So this is it, what happened today. So let's jump into the disassembling steps. First step was to remove the canopy to get access to the whole mechanics, and also remove the blades to avoid any damage of the blades, and also easier handling during the disassembling. Then it was time for the battery mount. This is just a simple, quick lock mechanics to remove, and then the landing gear. Everything went smooth so far, but one of the screws on the landing gear had a worn out screw head, so I will keep these parts assembled because it's only the landing gear, so no risk for safe flying. Then I removed the bottom plate of the frame. Everything went smooth so far. All the screws were Loctite. Some were pretty well Loctite, where there was a lot of Loctite on some screws, so it was pretty tough to remove some screws, but everything worked on the whole disassembling. Then I removed the whole zip ties, which keep all the servo cables, motor and ESC cables in place, to get access to the servos and uninstall the servos. For this I also had to remove the connection plates which connect the bottom plate of the frame and the main frame. Then everything was ready to uninstall the servos. First the swash plate servos. There is also a rod to disconnect, which connects the servo to the swash plate, and 4 screws on each servo before you can remove the servo from the frame. Then the same step on the tail servo, also 4 screws, and the link which connects the servo and the tail rotor head. ESC is mounted with some shock absorbing double-sided tape, so just pull off the ESC and then unscrew the plate which covers the connectors from the ESC to the motor. Disconnect all 3 connectors, and then I was able to remove the ESC. Uninstalling the motor was pretty easy. There were also a few screws which are also all Loctited, and had to remove some spacers to get access to the motor cables to make it easy to remove the motor from the frame. Then remove the motor from the motor mount itself. There is another bearing on the motor shaft, and this bearing stuck on the motor shaft, so I had to figure out how to remove this bearing. So I just unscrewed the pinion and moved the pinion on the shaft, so I also was able to get more movement on the bearing and removed all that stuff from the motor shaft. Next step was to uninstall the swash plate and the main rotor head. Nothing special here, just a few screws on the motor head, and then everything was ready to pull off the swash plate and the main rotor head from the main rotor shaft. Then remove the swash plate from the main rotor head to get better access to each part. I really wanted to disassemble every single part just to be sure that everything is in good shape on this helicopter before I reassemble it. Eventually bad bearings which have to be replaced, I will check all this, and for this I really want to make sure that every single part is okay on the helicopter before I rebuild it. For this I also disassembled the whole swash plate, every single screw. For the main gear I had to remove a rod which stuck a bit, but everything went well. A bit later the main gear was ready to remove from the frame. Then removed all the screws from the main gear. All looks good to reassemble the helicopter without big repairs or modifications. Then it was time for the frame itself. Just a lot of screws, a lot of spacers to remove, and all the parts will be cleaned before reassembling the helicopter. Then the lock system to remove, the lock system for the battery mount, and all the servo mounts, everything gets off the frame. If you get that helicopter as a used helicopter, you can download the instruction manual from the OXY website, from the Lynx Heli Innovations website, to make it easy to rebuild the helicopter after disassembling, because there's a serious bunch of screws and parts, so would be pretty tricky to rebuild the helicopter without instruction manual. All the bearings on the helicopter look good so far. The blade holder bearings on the tail rotor and main rotor. Some are not perfect anymore, but I will use them for the first test flights, and if everything else is fine, I will perhaps replace these bearings to get a perfectly working mechanic with absolutely new bearings. Then remove the mount for the tail servo from the tail boom. And then it was time for the tail rotor to disassemble. Also here one blade holder stuck a bit on the shaft, so I had to use a little force to remove it, but everything went finally well. Same situation for the bearing mounts for the rotor shaft of the tail rotor. They stuck also in the carbon fiber, so I had to use some force to remove them. So I will clean all these parts very well to make them fit better in the carbon parts. And we're already close to the final steps on the disassembling, the last few parts on the tail rotor mechanics. And then the final few steps on the tail boom. So finally remove all the parts and also the drive belt for the tail rotor head. This is it for today's episode on the OXY5. More episodes will follow about the rebuild and test flights. Thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next one. Have a good time. Happy flying. Bye bye.